with addictive combat. For all of the compliments that video games receive for the graphics, presentation, story, and sound design, the core gameplay is what keeps us coming back. To that end, some games handle the basic combat loop better than others, as we come back again and again for our fill of the action. Let's take a look at 15 games with addictive combat and what makes them unique. Guilty Gear series. Arc System Works had more of a niche following with the Guilty Gear series. However, over the years, the combat's complexity and outright insanity has attracted more players. For example, Guilty Gear Xrd utilizes a number of basic commands like punching, kicking, slashing, and heavy slashing. It's in the combination of these commands that special things happen, like Psych Bursts to escape opponents, or special tension gauge attacks. Along with a crazy story mode, Guilty Gear Xrd further incentivizes survival mode with MOM, offering a almost RPG-like progression system and leveling. Though tough to ultimately master, Guilty Gear's combat shouldn't be missed. Monster Hunter World. Non-Monster Hunter players may find the combat cumbersome and difficult to really enjoy, and that's okay, we've all been there. In truth, Monster Hunter boasts some of the deepest hack-and-slash gameplay out there, with its numerous weapon types, each with their own nuances to master. Monster Hunter World expands on this further. There's this satisfying feedback to scoring KO hits with the hammer, hitting that level 2 element discharge with the charge blade, or wrecking shop with the insect glaive. Coupled with the dynamic nature of fights and diverse build options, there's always a reason to come back. Diablo 3. Though Diablo 3 was pretty much borked upon release, it was the release of Reaper of Souls on consoles that gave new life to its combat. The overall responsiveness and speed was impressive, whether cascading through waves of foes as the Demon Hunter or shield bashing them with the Crusader. Killstreak bonuses, which brought increased XP, double damage orbs, and shrines for additional buffs further fed into the satisfying combat loop. Loot changes, the introduction of torment difficulties, crazy legendaries, the Paragon system, and adventure mode would see Diablo 3 entertain our action RPG desires for years. God of War PS4. Revamping the traditional hack-and-slash controls of the God of War franchise isn't easy. However, SIE Santa Monica's God of War on the PS4 does just that. Kratos' battles feel more visceral and personal this time around, mixing in weapons with brutal bare-handed attacks, shield bashes, and special attacks. There's a lot of variety to be had, from cleaving enemies in two with the Leviathan to smashing their skulls in with its finishers. Teaming up with Atreus for attacks, freezing enemies and kicking them into walls, or juggling for days. God of War presents so many amazing options for combat. Ninja Gaiden. Remember the old days when Ninja Gaiden was synonymous with hardcore difficulty? With the New Age Ninja Gaiden first released on Xbox in 2004, the Itagaki-led Team Ninja wanted to go even further. Combat was a third-person hack-and-slash-a-thon that relied on quick movement and reactions, even though players couldn't change attacks mid-move. The emphasis on constantly repositioning, slicing through enemies with Flying Swallow, and knowing the right weapon for the job made Ninja Gaiden difficult but immensely satisfying. Nioh. The combat in Team Ninja's Nioh is almost complementary to Ninja Gaiden. Instead of outright twitch slashing, there's a focus on altering one's stance, chaining combos together and preserving your ki with the right pulses, especially when dodging. However, the sheer range of weaponry and combinations available, along with employing ninja skills and magic, drives the complexity further up. As a whole, the combat in Nioh feels fast, responsive, and so satisfying while remaining deliberate and extremely weighty. Batman Arkham City. 3 words: free flow combat. Rocksteady may have understood what it meant to be the Dark Knight with detective mode, stealth options, and movement options like grappling hooks and gliding. However, its free-flow combat showcased what an unstoppable force Batman could be with accessible controls and advanced techniques. Indicators above enemy heads pointed out the right time to counter, and subsequent combos helped build up to more devastating moves. Batman Arkham City expanded on this by making combat faster, more responsive, and more varied, representing a series at its peak. One Finger Death Punch. Guitar Hero-esque beat-em-up is probably an apt description for One Finger Death Punch, but it's disingenuous. This beat-em-up only has 2 buttons, and you'll use them to strike foes when they're at the right distance from you. Sounds simple, but what occurs is the most brutal murdering of stick figure-like entities seen to man. Combos build up, Weapons are picked up for epic murder sequences, power smashes are used, eyeballs pop out, and the epicness just keeps ramping up. Even with its relatively simple looks, One Finger Death Punch is worth a shot. Dark Souls 3. Say what you will about its predecessor, but there's no denying that Dark Souls 3 went back to that classic Souls flavor that seemed to be lacking. The series has always been famed for its boss battles, and thankfully, the threequel contains some memorable ones like the Dancer of the Boreal Valley or Nameless King, and subsequently with DLC bosses like Slave Knight Gale and Dark Eater Midir. More importantly, the ever so solid combat from dodge rolling to weapon arts and parrying feels as great as ever. Yes, even if poise was never fully explained. Bloodborne. If Dark Souls is viewed as the turtler's dream, then Bloodborne is the frontliner's massacre. By minimizing blocking and incentivizing attacking, which helps regenerate red bar health, Bloodborne's combat is faster paced and more fluid. Weapon transformations allowed for more versatility in combat, thus making encounters all the more intriguing. However, it's everything from the lore to the level design and bosses that adds to the experience, slowly infusing the player with their own bloodlust as the game wears on. Nier Automata. Platinum Games' combat systems have always been considered top tier, and while Nier Automata doesn't reinvent the wheel, it does polish it incredibly well. Leaving aside the combination of bullet hell shooting and dodging, Nier Automata's weapon selection and movement feeds the urge to be aggressive. The plug-in chip modifications also allow for a great deal of freedom, encouraging OP builds like Infinite Berserk A2 with Phoenix Dagger and Offensive Heal. The addition of Perfect Evade, which slows down time after dodging enemy attacks at the right moment, and various enemy types lead to this brutal ballet of combat as every battle feels fun to play. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. On the surface, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance seems like your average Platinum Games style light attack, heavy attack game. Of course, you then realize the magic of parrying and eventually blade mode. The latter allows you to create openings to slice off individual limbs or entire enemies into bits in slow motion. Thus does the game become an experience of hacking and slashing away, waiting for that right parry and activating blade mode to dismember someone before grabbing their cores for health. The boss battles fit into this dynamic excellently, challenging you to learn individual mechanics to chop up individual pieces, master vertical slices, and cut through shields, and so on. Black Desert Online. Yes, Black Desert Online has a ton of grinding and some rather unsavory microtransactions, but how about that combat? Black Desert Online does away with the many traditional MMO mechanics like tab targeting, telegraphs, and more, challenging the player to a pseudo third-person hack-and-slash style game. Rather than tying different abilities to number keys, the combat system binds them to your movement. For instance, sprinting and then attacking performs a lunging attack. Each class is immensely satisfying to play as you dodge past attacks and wreck entire waves of enemies. Black Desert isn't perfect, or amazing for that matter, but the combat is definitely in a league of its own. Dragon Ball FighterZ. If Guilty Gear was the fighting game franchise that non-fighting game fans failed to grasp, then Dragon Ball FighterZ went the other way. Its combos can be immediately picked up and easy to pull off with a single button. Supers, teleports, and team-up abilities are also heavily encouraged in matches. However, as with Guilty Gear, it's mastering mechanics like Sparkling Blast, juggling enemies with tag team supers, dragon rushing in midair at the right time to continue combos, and so on that the game's depth really shines. Still, with quick, brutal combat and an awesome art style, Dragon Ball FighterZ will immediately sink its claws into you. Sleeping Dogs. Dismissed at first as a Batman Arkham City clone, the combat in Sleeping Dogs offers so much more. Leaving aside the ability to engage in shootouts, including the best simultaneous driving and shooting mechanism in any game ever, the melee combat is very diverse. Different combos can be mastered, but using different moves and taking advantage of your environment by smashing enemies into walls, hanging them with chandeliers, or shredding their faces with a fan is also an option. Throw in weapon play and a nice balance between countering and comboing, and Sleeping Dogs practically begs you to beat up the world. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.